I think a clue to answering that question is found actually in the question itself, probably revolving around that word portray. It's a great word of how do we portray life? How do we portray the gospel? And so often we tend to think of the gospel as something to be preached, not lived. When I would ask myself or people around me, how do we demonstrate the gospel? So often you get blank stares. No, we're not supposed to demonstrate the gospel. We're supposed to preach the gospel. And I guess if we're perfect enough, people will listen to us. And that's truncating the intention of the gospel. The gospel is meant to invade every aspect of who we are and to summon us to a different path that is aligned with the path that we were originally intended for as human beings in terms of who we are. What is the so what of the gospel? That's tied to how do we demonstrate the gospel? It's tied to what our role in this world is. I mean, St. Ambrose of Milan long ago once said, we do not seek to impose anything on the world, but instead we propose a more excellent way. And I don't think he's referring to some passivity. We don't want to speak up and speak truth when it's appropriate. That's not what he's referring to. But I think he's talking about that the gospel does not just need to be preached, which it does need to be and talked about, but it needs to be demonstrated. The gospel is not just propositional, it's plot. And it summons us into a story in which we're no longer the star of our own story, and we find significance outside of ourselves in accordance with the way that God is leading us. So I think that one of the ways that we can begin to portray the gospel is to see it being more than, not other than, but more than just ascribing to a belief system, an ideology, or ascribing to a biblical morality, which is different than a legalistic morality, but going to what is our impact in culture? How do we care for culture, not just scream at culture? How do we engage the heart? So often Hollywood gets the heart more often than the church does, yet the Scripture says the gospel is addressed to the heart. Issues of beauty, truth, and goodness infiltrating our embrace of the so what of the gospel. The arts. Do the arts matter? Does beauty matter? Does justice matter? And it's not just maintaining our own institutions as churches, but seeing us as these communities of new humanity that are to demonstrate, to portray what Jesus came to do in the first place. And that's getting us back to what we were originally intended to do. And that is to live in all of life to the glory of God, not just on Sunday mornings.